Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Politics here at Netroots Nation, where I've been leading the charge for progressives, along with People for Bernie, for the last day and a half. I'm here with Winnie Wong. You are one of the founders of People for Bernie and organizer of the People's Summit, which happened a few months ago and was a lot different than this. I'll say my reference because you're trying to make friends here. I think People's Summit was more capital P progressive. I think this conference is a little more establishment for my taste, and I think it's more professional political folk as opposed to younger political activists trying to learn how to get involved, which I think was more the People's Summit, although there were also professional political types at the People's Summit too. How are you liking this conference compared? Obviously, you're biased to your own conference, but...
Well, I'm a friendly person, and so, I have a lot of friends here in this community. But I do think that it's important to understand that it's okay to be a professional political progressive, but if you're not principled in your professionalism and your politics doing, then that can get a little tricky. So I think that a lot of the folks at the People's Summit were also new to organizing, and they aren't part of institutions. Mm-hmm. They are people who are from the grassroots who really became galvanized during the Bernie Sanders campaign, and it was a space to offer them a way to onboard into the various organizations that participated as conveners. Mm-hmm. And those organizations are represented here as well. We have a big booth in the middle of the convention hall. And so, our revolution is here, Democratic Socialists of America is here, PDA, People's Action, People for Bernie, and of course the mighty National Nurses United, who are always on the front line of all the right fights, all the social justice fights.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I kind of look at it as like a meal. So obviously the main meal in the Democratic Party has not been working, other than President Obama twice. For over a decade. We've lost over 1,000 seats. Everybody knows the numbers. And I think this past election showed that we've also lost connection. I'm not really Democratic Party proper, but the Democratic Party has a disconnect and a branding problem. And I think this conference, I read the agenda, I read the sessions they're having, and it seems to me that they're kind of focused not on what the main meal has to be, but kind of tinkering around the edges. I don't see much for Medicare for All here, free public college tuition, a lot of the things that polls are now moving towards, a lot of the things People for Bernie are pushing for, our revolution, the Young Turks, and the more progressive wing. Do you feel like what we're seeing here, they're just kind of slow to wake up to our end, or what are you seeing?
I haven't actually been to very many of the breakout sessions, so I don't know that I can actually comment on the program overall. I like that there are a lot of really progressive candidates who are running races in 2018 and campaigns in 2018 that can really be a challenge to both the establishment class of the Democratic Party as well as the opposition, which is of course the Trump government and the GOP. But if the institutions that are behind the Netroots aren't willing to really support Medicare for All and free college, and when I say free college, I mean free college, not debt-free college, and a federal 15 and criminal justice reform, and really taking a bold stance on racial justice, then I think that this would be a huge missed opportunity for them to build power, because the people are crying out for that, right? Voters, people across America are really demanding that. Yeah. The protests that you're seeing all around the country behind these issue fights are really, should really be a wake-up call to the Democratic Party, right? That these candidates need to come out in support of what is not actually, as Bernie would say, radical ideas. These are just it's like being a decent human being. We're not. There's nothing radical about what these demands are, and so Yeah, I mean, I'd love to sort of see some of these groups represented here, message to their constituency, because a lot of these groups have members and they have people who subscribe to their email lists and so forth, and who sign their petitions. Like, I'd love to see them start messaging in a much more progressive way that is instructive. So that like their members can like participate in the political revolution, which isn't Bernie's political revolution. It's like it's the revolution of the people, right? Like this is not complicated, and it shouldn't be complicated, because we've lost. We've really lost. The Democratic Party has lost. It had its ass handed to them, and it's not my fault, right? And it's not your fault. And it's not Bernie's fault. So, yeah.
But one thing that really is alarming to me is ideology is ideology, but like if you can't read political tea leaves, that's a bigger problem. And you look at, Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump 2-1. We've seen John Ossoff, the DNC, put hordes of money into that race. In Georgia, the most expensive congressional race in American history, he lost. And he lost pace. Trump only won that district by 1 point. Ossoff lost by 4 points. But it seems to me, stories just coming out. Nancy Pelosi just raised $26 million, so far in 2017. DNC emails I see. I don't see many emails from the DNC about Flint, Michigan, or Standing Rock.
There are no emails.
Well, I'm getting tons of emails.
Well, no,
right.
I'm just saying that there hasn't been a single email sent out about Flint, Michigan, or Standing Rock, or about the state of like mass poverty in this country, right? Like staggering income inequality, right?
What I'm saying is, it seems like they're very still focused on we just got to we got to refine our message. We didn't get it out there enough, and we need to keep fundraising.
Well, that's maintaining the status quo,
right?
And that is like something that I think really needs to change. And if they don't actually change that, I think that like they really risk like bleeding more voters, one, and two, ensuring that like this very ideological, conservative, nationalist government that we have in Washington build more power and more capacity. They're already really optimized. So it's unimaginable to me if we don't actually start winning. We are losing in a way that I can't even adequately describe in one interview. We're losing. And there's a whole host of reasons why we're losing. Some of it is like, a corporate media that is really stacked against us. Some of it is a better corporate media strategy on the other side. There's so many reasons. But if we want to like engage young voters in 2020, they need to make sure that they're like sending out the type of message that will appeal to young voters, delivered by the right messengers. Right. So that's the thing. I just like I don't know Nancy Pelosi personally, and I'm not here to throw shade at Nancy Pelosi, but I'm pretty sure that if you're like a millennial voter, you have no idea who she is. You just have no idea who she is. But people know Trevor Hall, the young man who became a viral meme when he questioned her on why the Democratic Party would ever question democratic socialism. Right. Like that became a viral meme. And so, they just need to be more. They need to be more tuned in to like what's actually going on in the world, and the world of public opinion. I think certainly happening online and other spaces. These echo chambers are, I think, very dangerous now. Yeah. So that's I'm trying to be like very diplomatic here, but also like trying to be lucid and help the TYT audience like understand.
Well, I also think, and we spoke about this.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that like TYT sends me out on a lot of stories that are not sexy and won't automatically go viral and get us great ratings, but they're just important. Flint's an example. I did a disappearing middle class tour last year. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin in like 5 days. And a lot of stories that really put a face to, I think, what Bernie talks about. And the disconnect between, and by the way, I just want to be clear, the Republicans are not equal, they're worse. So I'm not giving Republicans any credit, but the disconnect between how bad it is out there versus the policy prescriptions, Chuck Schumer's better deal or the Democratic Party's better deal. This is a new proposal. It doesn't have the word labor unions in it. It puts forth $15 minimum wage, but still these talking points about better training, which amounts to really nothing. A lot of talking points about this isn't about the government takeover. It's a poll-tested document that really skims around the edges to what we actually need. And if Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, again, I don't know either of them, it's nothing personal, but if they were out in the country seeing how bad it was, they would see, A, this is ethically and morally what's right to do, but this is a political winner, too. Can you kind of talk about that disconnect? Because I know you've been out in the country. You've seen what I see.
So this is a very good question, and I think that it would take hours to really unpack. But I do agree with you. I think that, like, and to put it very simply, if you're working 3 jobs anywhere in this country, not just, in like red states, but like in upstate New York, say, for instance, you're working 3 jobs just to make ends meet, pay your bills, keep the electricity turned on, keep the internet bill paid, put food on the table. Like, you don't know what antitrust is. You definitely don't know what, like, monopolies and mergers are, right? Like, you don't understand. You have no idea. You will have a very hard time, like, wrapping your head around this type of, like, high-level policy speak that derives from the market, right? And so it's not going to resonate with you, right? It's so much easier to speak authentically about bread and butter issues that affect all people, right? Like, do they have enough food on the table? Can they send their children to school without worrying that their child might get shot in school by someone else or perhaps by a policeman? Can they go to the doctor if they have a fever that won't break? Can they then afford the antibiotics for the prescription that they were prescribed, right? Like, these are things that, like, they want to hear about, and they want to hear that the government, that their elected officials, that the party, that the Democratic Party will make sure that they answer yes to all of those questions. Yes, we will make sure that you can afford your prescription medication for that 7-day fever that just won't break, right? We will make sure that your child is not shot by a policeman in school, right? We will make sure that you can get food on the table, nutritious food on the table for your family of 4. That's what they want to hear. They don't know what antitrust is. They don't know what monopolies are. They just don't know what that is. Like, capitalism is a very, very well-designed, monolithic system. And so we're all living under it. And so it's just extremely difficult for people to understand that. And so while they hear that it's better, if they don't know what it is, how can they believe it, right? So that's, like, I think my critique of that messaging platform. And I'm not, like, throwing shade at, like, Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or any of the think tanks that were instrumental to the crafting of this policy document. But I think that, I think I've answered your question.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I also think it amounts to getting out there. So Bernie Sanders, before he decided to run for president, he actually went down south and spoke to a lot of Republican communities. In reading his book, it's in there how he went down to, I believe, Alabama and some other places. And Bernie Sanders, not just him, but progressive politicians tend to go out and they're seeing what's going on there.
Sure.
Bernie, we've seen it the last few months. He lost the primary, but he hasn't slowed down. How can you know what the prescriptions are if you don't know how bad the problems are? And whether it's Pelosi or these other folks, it's not an attack on them because FDR was a wealthy person. John F. Kennedy was a wealthy person. But most of the leadership is removed from that kind of hardship, and they're not out there seeing how bad it is for most people. I mean, look at Mitch McConnell. I think he's worth a net worth of $20 million. So it seems like whether it's on the Democratic side or the Republican side, I think the anti-establishment fervor is finally, and this is why a lot of people that I spoke with at Trump rallies, I was shocked when I said, well, if not Trump, who? They'd say Bernie Sanders. A lot of Trump people. Do you feel like it's going to take what we're seeing, progressive candidates running in 2018 and on the local level too, but getting that diversity not only of color, of gender, of sexual orientation, but of income and experience, of class?
Of class, yeah. We have to talk about race and we have to talk about class. And I think that the Democratic Party has actually done a pretty bad job of not talking about class and dividing us by race. And so this is going to be a very contentious point, but I'm going to use this opportunity to try to elaborate a little bit on that, right? I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but I mean, I think that is actually what they have done, right? Like they've really spent not enough time underscoring like the class divisions that in many ways they've helped to create.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're just living in a very dangerous time right now, right? Where like the Trump government is nationalist. I think we can safely say that. And the Democrats are maybe a little clueless. I mean, I think that's, you know, I don't like they say that they're the party of the working class, but for many years now, they have capitulated to the demands of the corporations. And so, in fact, they are the instruments of the corporate class.
Well,
I
don't want to cut you off, but a perfect symbol of that, I remember at the DNC. I was there to cover it. Hillary Clinton's giving her speech. She uses that phrase, we're the party of the working people.
Right.
And you see skybox after skybox of lobbyists and donors. And there's just a real contradiction there.
There is. And also, I just, you know, and again, like the party is an edifice, you know. There are plenty of people inside the party who are very good people, but they don't control the party anymore. And I think that this is something that like we've really learned over the past, you know, couple of years is the influence of like money in our political process and the influence of money in the Democratic Party, I think is something that has just got to change. You know, and if we don't get that, the people will shut it down. Yeah. And the way they'll shut it down is by making sure that like someone else worse than Trump is elected, because they'll actually shut down. You know, that's actually what's happening, is that like lots of people in this country are not like, they're not conservative. I mean, America has had 400 years of like, you know, of becoming what it is today, right? Where like we did have a black president. I'm sitting in this seat. They'll shut down. Voters will really shut down. Working class people in this country of all colors will shut down if they don't hear that like this so-called party of the working class is really there for them. Yeah. And I think for me, like, that's terrifying, right? Like, because I'm just like, what am I even doing? Like, this is not good, you know? Because the other side is just so well organized, you know? Like, they have contingency plan after contingency plan. They're ready for the next thing, right? To catch the fallout of the thing that is being tweeted by Donald Trump, right? Like, it's never really a scandal for them for more than, like, you know, the news cycle. And I'm just like, man, that's good, right? They just have a contingency plan. Right. And our contingency plan just isn't as good because I don't think we have one. Right. And I think that's going to continue to be a problem leading up to 2018 and 2020. And the fact that, like, I think the fact that, like, people's opinions don't matter is weird and bad, right? Like, when you don't factor in voices of people, your constituents, and what they really want, then you don't really have a democracy.
Well, I mean, we saw the Cambridge study a few years ago that said like 90% of what people want actually doesn't get done in Congress.
That's right.
And I could tell you, it's interesting to me when you hear all this talk about our democracy is under attack with Russia and stuff like that. Right. And I've said it's fine to have an investigation, nothing against that. But, I mean, I was in Standing Rock where state police were essentially working with the FBI to protect an oil company. Right. In Flint, that's not a democracy. There's an emergency manager law in effect, so the elected officials of Flint are not handling that water response. There's so many other examples of democracy being under attack, and you don't have democracy when your politicians, it's not only Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, it's pretty much all of them, essentially are spending almost 3/4 of their time in a separate office off Capitol Hill dialing for dollars. That's not democratic.
They're fundraising, yeah.
Right.
They're fundraising. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are 400 members of Congress, 435 members of Congress, and so I don't know what they're doing with all their time. But I definitely think about like how much time they've spent in office, and how little they've actually done with their time. So I mean, like, I do think about this a lot, and I think about, like, and I've had actually really amazing conversations with different people here about, like, what it would take to change everything, right? And you need 300 progressive, really truly progressive Congress people, and then we never have to worry again. Really, that's true. You really only need like 200.
We could close up shop. That's all we need.
No, but really, if you had 300 truly progressive members of Congress who would, support single payer, federal 15, the expansion of Medicaid, criminal justice reform, decarceration. I mean, like, all of these things and more, we would have a great, peaceful, prosperous country, full of beautiful, Americans of all, races and creeds and tendencies.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
Right.
We just have 435 people in there. Some are Democrats and some are Republicans, and a lot of them are not doing a lot. So I think that's, like, actually an issue that most people don't actually think about. Like, they're like, who are, like, you have senators, right? Like, and then they're like, oh, the senator is like, this senator is like a national figure now because, like, they've been on Conan O'Brien, and this senator ran for president and is like a global meme.
Right.
Bernie Sanders, right? Like, Bernie Sanders is not just like the most popular politician in America. He's like a global meme. He's like extremely famous in Italy.
Yeah.
People know him in China. Like, he's famous, right? But, like, the 435 members of Congress, you couldn't name 20 of them. I mean, I can name at least 200 of them because that's who I am. But, like, imagine if we changed that. I don't know what that would take, but I think about that a lot, and as something that needs to be done in the next, like, 10 years.